So we start off the module 3 section of section B of 2017 with a simple question to discuss two advantages of vegetative propagation. We know that vegetative propagation is a form of asexual reproduction. So we're looking at the fact that we have the chance, well, it's technically not a chance, right? But we have the continuation of advantageous traits. It's asexual reproduction, right? So continuous traits are going to be continued to actually, you know, proliferate within the generations through vegetative propagation, right? And it produces offspring, right, at a much faster rate, right? So generally looking at those two advantages, we're supposed to discuss them though. So you need to discuss what we mean by the continuation of the continuity of the advantageous traits. Right, so we're going to speak about the fact that it's asexual, and generally for this type of vegetative propagation, our different plants will have the same advantageous traits as our mother plant, our parent species that we're getting the propagation from. And we're speaking about the fact that within general reproduction, right, general asexual reproduction within plants now, right, how does it differ? General asexual reproduction in plants now, we know you'd have to speak about the entire germination of the pollen grain, and then what happens in the micropyle, the generation or the synergy, then the case of the endosperm and the embryonic component giving the embryonic the meristem and the radicle. You have to talk about all those processes. Those processes are much longer than if we were to just use vegetative propagation. So you're just gonna have to speak about how, right, or discuss, right, how or why, right, the offspring, right, being produced at a much higher rate within vegetative propagation would be an advantage as well. So I gave you two advantages. All you have to do is use it, discuss them, explain them. That is 5 marks, right? And yeah, that is the end of that question. And then we're asked to look at two genetic consequences of sexual reproduction. We know that mutagenesis is more prevalent, right? Mutations are more prevalent, right? So mutagenesis is more has a higher rate of occurring within sexual reproduction, as you will have crossing over and stuff like that that would actually, create a higher risk for mutations to occur. Right, so we have that within sexual reproduction. We could have the loss of advantageous traits through variation. Loss of advantageous traits through variation as well. Some other genetic consequences of sexual reproduction, what would those be? Genetic consequences. Yeah, generally those, right? So mutations would be more prevalent, and there would be a loss of advantageous traits. And what you're supposed to do is discuss those. So I listed two genetic consequences of sexual reproduction, and you're supposed to discuss those. So more mutations mean what, right? They are it would arise, right, or we could have the rise of disadvantageous traits, right, are harmful traits to the organism themselves. And we could have lots of advantageous traits where once the organism was perfectly suited to the environment, and through variation, right, their offspring are not. So how would that fare with organisms that are living within these environments without the advantageous traits that were lost through sexual reproduction? I would speak to that, speak to those genetic consequences, and speak to how discuss these genetic consequences of sexual reproduction. Right, that's basically what. Go ahead.
So, sir,
Go ahead.
sir,
Go ahead.
are we only to talk about disadvantages, or can we talk about advantages too?
Consequences. You could speak about the advantages, right? You could speak about disadvantages and advantages. Now that I think of it, right, consequences give a connotation that is disadvantages you're speaking about, right? But we could speak about advantages as well. What would be the advantages here?
We could say that because of genetic variation, organisms are more likely to overcome selective pressures, and there's a greater evolutionary potential and chance for speciation to occur.
Lovely. Right, so they can survive selective pressures a little bit more. They can withstand selective pressures, right? And then the variation gives us the rise of speciation, right? Or different types of species and stuff like that. All right, and then with the loss of advantageous traits, we could actually have the production of advantageous traits through natural selection, right? Via variation, and right. So you could speak about those stuff as well, right? All right, so that's is that it? Okay, last question. Describe the development of a fruit and seed structures within floral structure. So we know the fruit, the seed, right? What happens after double fertilization? We're going to have the embryo, the zygote developing through mitosis to produce the embryo, right? And the embryo would be connected to a suspensory column, right? And then that now would actually be a part touch connected to a basal cell, which will anchor it to the wall of the ovule, right? So we have that there, right? After that, we're going to have continued genetic division, right? Not genetic division, cellular division, right? Resulting into a larger embryo, and then we're going to have at the hypocotyle, we're going to get the creation of cotyledon. So whether or not it's one cotyledon or two cotyledons, it could be dicot or monocot. You guys know about those from C-sec. So whether or not it's a dicot flower or monocot flower, which when trying to use dicot, right? So I would say, for example, within dicot players, we're going to divergence of two cotyledons, right? Or in one, within monocot, you can have the creation of one cotyledon, right? And after that, now we know that generally at the hypocotyle, right, that section between the embryonic hemisphere, right, and the cotyledon, we're gonna have the production of a meristem, right? What's the name of that meristem? The meristem at the top. What's the name of that meristem? We're gonna have two meristem. Go ahead.
Sorry, are you asking if it's like lateral meristem or apical?
Yes. So it'd be an apical meristem, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to have the shoot apical meristem at the top, and we're going to have the root apical meristem. Lovely. And at the top, you know, that will form our plumule, and at the bottom, that will form our root system, right? Our radicle, right? So we're going to have that being formed, and then the ovule itself will now be filled with the endosperm and that entire structure of the seed, and then that will harden, and then the walls of the ovule will actually harden into the seed coat, right? And then that entire area there, would actually be it's there, it would become our what for the fruit? Our endocarp. Lovely. So it's going to be our endocarp, right? And then the ovary itself will swell, and integuments will swell and complexify, and those sugars are going to be derived, right? And starch derivatives, and then starch derivatives will ripen and become sugar derivatives, right? And now that ovary will swell into what we call the mesocarp of the fruit, and then the skin of the ovary now, right? The outside layers of the ovary, the epithelium of the ovary will actually harden and become the skin of the fruit, or what we call the exocarp, right? So we're just describing that type of development within the fruit and seed structures, right? So generally, I would take it to describe the seed, right? And then after see this develop now, then I would start describing the ovary and how it complexifies into the mesocarp, into the endocarp, mesocarp, and exocarp of fruit, right? And that would be the end of that section.